Good evening, Wilmington. My name is Glenn Brand, and it is my privilege and pleasure to serve as the superintendent of the Wilmington Public Schools. And I welcome you this evening to a virtual community forum, an effort to hopefully provide our parents, guardians, and families with some insightful and timely information as we prepare to navigate the final 8 weeks of this school year, as well as the upcoming summer. It's certainly understood that there is an awful lot of information that is flowing constantly at our families. And so my hope is that this presentation will provide a little bit more timely information around a number of things that are going on. I will start by thanking WCTV for the opportunity to broadcast this live this evening. For those members of our community who perhaps are interested in the content here, but maybe didn't have the chance to join. As always, these presentations are available on demand through the WCTV platform. We'll also post this on our district website tomorrow, along with the presentation that I'll go through this evening. And that will also be made available tomorrow on our district webpage. Sorry about that. The three parts to the presentation this evening. The first is Q&A, and thank you to members of our community who provided those questions, and we'll take some time to address those. The second area of the presentation tonight is to provide a number of updates on a number of key areas. They include health guidance, social emotional support, special education, and MCAS and AP testing. And then finally, the final section tonight is really taking a look ahead to, as I mentioned, the upcoming number of weeks here left in the spring and going into the summer. And in particular, a few updates around summer academic programming, class placement information, upcoming school events, our CARES program, food services, as well as athletics. And so with that as the backdrop, let's begin. First off, again, thank you for members of the community who submitted the number of questions over the course of the last few days on the Google form. Appreciate you taking the time to do so. Where there was some redundancy or duplication of questions, I combined them, and I'll go through as best I can to provide answers for those that were given. So we'll first start off in no particular order with the first question. And that is, has Wilmington or WPS given thought to offering a virtual or remote learning option for the 2021-22 school year? A great question, and not surprising that it is on some people's minds out there, not just in Wilmington, but I'm sure beyond our borders. There are a couple of things to note on this. First off, there is no expectation that has currently been made at all from the Department of Education or DESE that requires school districts to provide remote instruction for next school year. And the underlying reason for that is simply the expectation of a full return to in-person learning. With that said, it certainly is understood that in any typical school year, we sometimes do have students who may have more complex medical needs, and the opportunity for our district and our respective schools to work to support students certainly will continue, and we'll work closely with families to try and best support students in that kind of situation the best that we can. The second question centered around really trying to gather more information about where each grade is at this year as pre-COVID years academically, and also a desire to learn a little bit more about the steps or actions that are going to be taken to try and close learning gaps, and related to all of that, any budgets or funding in place for those efforts. A couple of things to note on this, and I'll only be rather brief tonight about this because at the upcoming May 12th school committee meeting, Ms. Christine Elliott, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Staff Development, will be providing a more extensive update around the plans that we have in place to measure and address student learning loss, both in the near term and longer term future. And as part of that presentation that will again take place on May 12th, she will be outlining our plans for supporting students during the summer, which I'll get into actually a little bit later this evening briefly, as well as into next school year. But what I think is most important to note here is throughout our really all of our grades, instruction this year was prioritized over assessment when possible to simply try and allow the most time that we could for curriculum to be covered. And I think that that's an important distinction, if you will, that we've tried to make and with and through Ms. Elliott's leadership and working with principals and teachers where the prioritization has centered. In terms of budgets and funding, that will actually be addressed in a subsequent question here around ESSER funds, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a moment. The next question is around quarantine, and in terms of specifically how we will be handling education during quarantine at each grade and school level. Also a great question, and one that we are certainly well aware of is a reality. In a few moments, I'll actually provide an update, a very recent update that was just released from DESE last week that will hopefully positively impact the total level of quarantining or number of students, I guess you could say, that will be placed into quarantine. But nevertheless, we recognize that there will be situations in which some students may need to be placed into quarantine. The approach that we have taken in consultation with our Teachers Association and in the support of the school committee is really broken down into grade bands. And so I'll just briefly describe that. It varies from level to level. First, at the pre-KK level, pre-kindergarten or kindergarten level, the classroom teacher there will be providing asynchronous remote instruction, plus a synchronous daily check-in, and that will occur to try and still provide some level of support for students and access, unless, of course, the classroom itself has been moved to fully remote. At the grade 1 to 5 level, if a student is in quarantine, the classroom teacher will be providing asynchronous instruction and will also provide a simultaneous 30-minute or thereabouts morning check-in and one additional content area or lesson each day of the teacher's choosing. An opportunity perhaps to introduce new concepts or reteach some previously taught component of a lesson. And that'll take place through live stream. At the grade 6 to 8 level or middle school, students in quarantine, the classroom teacher will provide a combination of asynchronous and simultaneous or live streaming instruction as appropriate to the course curriculum. Again, unless the entire classroom has been moved to fully remote, which the good news is we expect that reality to be far less and in fact really not all that likely as we are going to be adjusting to the new DESE guidelines. And at the high school level, grade 9 to 12, again, a different reality there, but still the opportunity to support students in quarantine who are in that remote status through live streaming. Next question. Really is one that I know undoubtedly as each week passes on the minds of many, and that is what the heck does the year 2021-22 look like for our planning as it relates to social distancing, masking, and really all of the other adjustments that we've had to make along with obviously all other school districts this year. It's a great question, and I will be honest, I wish I had the best and most timely answer to that, but I don't right now, unfortunately. What we have come to learn is that school districts will be receiving initial guidance from the Department of Education or DESE at some point in May. Beyond that, there are currently no plans or discussions that I am aware of from either the CDC, from the Department of Education, or the Massachusetts Department of Public Health that has indicated any kind of change in course for the fall around mask wearing and the current physical distancing classrooms and during lunch. In other words, unless something else is forthcoming or there are further developments that ensue in the next, obviously, number of months, I think it probably is reasonable to assume at this juncture that what we are looking like right now in terms of requirements for physical distancing in classrooms, mask wearing, and how we're approaching lunch in terms of 6-foot spacing between students when masks aren't being worn is likely to resemble what we have in place now. Again, of course, that could change, but there's been nothing to suggest that right now there's any plans to do so. But obviously, we'll stay tuned for that. The next question, taking a little bit of a look ahead to next year, and the question, why exactly is school starting later for the 2021-22 school year? The starting point in terms of an answer for that is that Labor Day is on Monday, September the 6th, next school year. And so that's a little bit later. That's the first piece to this answer. And traditionally, at least here in Wilmington, school begins the week before the Labor Day holiday. And so in somewhat aligning with how we've approached the school start time, we've structured our calendar, our school calendar around that. And so it is a little bit later indeed, but it really ties into the exact placement, if you will, or when Labor Day falls. The next question, is Wilmington planning on applying for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund? A heck of a long title, but by short, what's maybe something that you've started to come to hear about is referred to as ESSER funds. And what kinds of things are being requested as part of that? Certainly a great question there for that. And what I can tell you is that as a school district, we absolutely have and will continue to apply for the available ESSER grant money. At this point in time, I think it's important to note that we've applied for and have been approved for ESSER 1 funds. Currently there are three separate ESSER grant funds available, or grants available. We've applied for and been approved, as I mentioned, for the first fund or grant. And these funds in particular have been and will be used for instructional technology, personal protective equipment or PP&E, and other related needs to the current school year, and as well to help support some element of our funding for next school year. Wilmington will be applying for the ESSER 2 grant. Again, we will be applying. We have not done so yet. That application window, as I understand it, has not yet opened up, but when it does, we will. Those funds will be used for some PP&E as well. And in addition, as part of that ESSER 2 grant, there is a requirement for school districts to dedicate at least $10,000 towards supporting mental health needs of students. I'll take this opportunity and just point out that at the March 24th school committee meeting, we outlined specific planning with our leadership in the Student Support Services Department in terms of our plan for Wilmington to bolster our mental health supports, including additional staff, as well as additional resources. And part of these funds out of this ESSER 2 grant will be also used to support summer academic programming, which, as I mentioned, will be outlined a little bit further in the presentation. Finally, the ESSER 3 grant hasn't yet been released. We will apply for this grant when it's available. And at this time, we haven't finalized any plans for the expenditure of those funds, as we simply don't yet know what that total allocation will be. However, we'll also plan to spend a portion of those funds for summer school programming, as well as academic enrichment opportunities, as well as any other district-related needs. The next question. The next question, there's actually two, and I'll try and combine them together. And this has to do with, I know, a topic that's gathered some attention very recently as we've returned back this week with the full return of students at the middle school level. And that is, will alternatives to kids sitting on the gym floor be considered? Could additional desks be purchased or tables spaced out for lunch? And there is another question that I'll just take this opportunity, if I may, to combine the two. Contending with lunch while ensuring the 6-foot distance between students truly represents one of the more challenging operational issues that all school districts have had to contend with. And you are indeed hearing about different approaches that different schools and different districts may be taking. Here in particular with the configuration and the spatial limitations at our middle school, it does create a number of challenges that because of that 6-foot distance need, necessitated additional locations outside of the current lunchroom. The current lunchroom or cafeteria, if you will, of the Wilmington Middle School can accommodate at 6-foot distance approximately 125 students. That's it, and that's not a lot as it relates to the other students that make up the total population. A variety of other options were considered from the planning team at the school in terms of where and how best to accommodate students during lunch. It included the bleachers in the gymnasium, and it also included consideration of moving tables and chairs in and out of that space to accommodate depending on the grade level, between 35 and 70, 75 or so students. Both of those options, quite honestly, were just considered somewhat problematic. And let me just explain a little bit more. In terms of the bleachers, the Wilmington High School's bleachers are far greater in terms of both the total numbers of them and just larger in terms of the total size that they can accommodate. The bleachers at the middle school with 6-foot social distancing can only accommodate approximately 30 students. So that wasn't terribly helpful in their planning and in their consideration. And setting up tables and chairs certainly is another obvious thought in terms of how best to accommodate students. There are a couple of problems that were quickly realized with that. And if you can imagine effectively taking the gymnasium offline with desks and chairs or tables and chairs in place there all the time. And I say all the time because to move those in and out multiple times a day would be an awful lot on the custodial crew, number one. Number two, it would create a situation of placement physically, where to put those. But more importantly, putting tables and chairs into the gymnasium space on a permanent basis so that they wouldn't be moved would take offline the gymnasium. And in inclement weather, as well as in the early morning, obviously that school has an early start time when the grass is usually still quite wet, at least in these weeks, that would really impact the ability for the staff there to offer effectively any kind of PE programming. And so on all of those sort of considerations, and in learning about approaches that this approach that some other school districts had been putting into place, the decision is to have some of the students sitting on beach towels if they so choose to bring those on the gymnasium floor for the lunch period. It allows them to be spaced out. It allows them to still commingle with their students, their colleagues, or their friends at a safe distance. And it is one with the middle school leadership will be embarked upon on a rotational basis, so that not all students will certainly be in that place for the rest of the 8 weeks for the spring. And the final piece I know some have asked is why we didn't consider changing the schedule there at the middle school. Fair question, but with 8 weeks left in the school year, completely overhauling the schedule just wasn't thought to be in anyone's best interest. That's number one. And number two, in order to fit all of the students into the cafeteria at the middle school would effectively require starting lunches within the first hour, literally, that students start their school day there. And we just didn't see that as a good option either. Next question. An update on MCAS testing, I'll just quickly, we will address that in the presentation in a few moments, so stay tuned for that. In terms of the other part here, this question is related obviously to the last round around the middle school gymnasium. I will just, one thing I forgot to point out is that in between the lunches, that floor space is cleaned. So next students coming in will certainly have a clean space there. The next question here, upon return to normalized in-person learning in the fall, there's an interest in understanding more about student evaluations and what supports and special education services may increase. And in addition to that, how is supports being made for students that will be qualifying for 504s and education plans? And finally, how is the district planning to meet children identified at risk or diagnosed with dyslexia? All great and obviously very important questions. So a couple of things to say in response to this. First off, during the course of this year, the district, Wilmington, contracted with outside providers for a number of related services, including speech and language, physical therapy, school psychologist, as well as academic evaluators. If necessary, we plan to pursue this course of action for next year as well, in order to ensure that student services and compliance is met as well as maintained. Currently, the district is in timeline compliance and has completed the backlog of evaluations that were due in the spring of 2020. Those were completed in the fall of this year. And if needed during next year, the district will again, as mentioned, utilize outside service providers to help ensure students receive their services and evaluations in compliance. Also of note, the district participated in the early norming sample and pilot for the dyslexia screener through Dr. Nadine Gabb's Dyslexia Lab in the early childhood centers during the 2018-19 school year, as well as the beginning of the 2019-20 school year. Unfortunately, that was interrupted last year by COVID. But also to note, consistent with DESE guidance recently released, the district will be using an approved screener to assess students in the fall. We will be also presenting additional information, including the selected screening tool, at the upcoming May 12th school committee meeting. For students that have a dyslexia diagnosis and receive services, the district utilizes a number of evidence-based programs with progress monitoring and will continue to do so based on individual student needs. And finally, additional professional development for staff will also be provided related to the identification and support of students with dyslexia. Next, please. Okay, that wraps up the Q&A part of the presentation tonight, and now I'm going to move on to some of the many updates that I mentioned at the outset. First off, starting with health guidance. And I referenced this briefly just a few moments ago, some of the recent changes that the Department of Education sent out last week, in fact, during the April vacation week. And the update specifically is around close contacts. And so as this slide outlines, and there's a whole lot more information about this available if you are interested on the DESE website. We will also make this information available on the Wilmington Public Schools website. But as short as can be relative to this guidance and these updates, close contacts now, based upon the direction of the Department of Education, who are exposed to a COVID-19 positive individual in the classroom or on the school bus, while those students are masked, do not have to quarantine unless they were within the 3 feet of distance of that positive individual, for a total of, what has not changed recently, the 15 minutes during a 24-hour period. And this does get complicated. So if you are at home watching this and trying to make sense of all this, please trust me, it takes a little bit of consideration with all of the various parameters, if you will, as it relates to this. So you're not alone. The difference here, though, is that so bus and classroom are now considered different. And what's no longer the case, according to the Department of Education, is the need for districts to have close contacts to quarantine. Doesn't apply if someone was identified as a close contact, however, outside of the classroom or outside of the school bus. And the most common examples that come to mind of what that would look like would be sports or extracurricular activities. And of course, during lunch, when students are unmasked, of course. But it goes on to try and provide, again, that clarity around close contacts and, and when ultimately they return to school. And so what that really means in practice, as we, as well here in the schoolhouses, wrap our minds in thinking around this, is anyone who has been within 3 to 6 feet of distance of anyone who's tested positive in the classroom or on the school bus no longer needs to be quarantined. I'm sorry. They do, however, need to get tested, and they must send those results to the school. And that is a change from just before April break, where I'm sure many will recall that if there was a positive case in a classroom, those that were within that 6-foot distance, that's a CDC guideline that identifies a close contact, not only needed to quarantine, but they also needed to get tested. Next slide, please. And just as a reminder, and much of this you have seen before, and to my knowledge at the time of this presentation, the CDC guidelines have not been changed relative to identifying a close contact. And so you can see that information there. And of course, if you wish, visit the CDC website. We also have links to this information off of the district website. But this is clearly becoming something that is rather challenging to manage, but my hat goes off to our school nurses who throughout our district, in conjunction with the Board of Health in Wilmington, have been working so very hard and so diligently at contact tracing and working to ensure that those folks, whether it be staff or families of students, are notified. And that will not change, and that will continue as we move forward through the last 8 weeks of school. Next slide, please. An update, shifting gears somewhat to social emotional support, of course, and very understandably a topic that many are concerned about, understanding that while we are making our way back to a full return in person, we are still all contending with these immense challenges that COVID-19 and the pandemic have resulted in. And so we are continually mindful of social emotional support and how we can best bolster that and ensure that our students and our staff are as well as they can be and receiving any kinds of support that they might. There's a couple of things to just bring to your attention on this topic. First off, there's an opportunity for parents and guardians for a lunch and learn this Friday, April the 30th, from 12 until 1. And the title of the session is A Deeper Dive into Effective Coping for Children and Adolescents. And if you're interested in signing up for that, this is a virtual event. You can visit the Student Support Services page off the district's website. And there is an opportunity or a place there for you to register. There is no charge for this. And after that registration, a virtual link will be emailed to you just prior to the presentation. Panorama education is a term that, if you've been following some of the updates through the school committee, you may have heard recently, and I mentioned this a short time ago in terms of some of the planning that the district is doing around bringing on board additional resources, and this is one of them. And through this suite, if you will, the Panorama Education Suite, it is a assessment tool, I suppose, if you will, that will be gathering information around social emotional well-being, social emotional learning, and it will be a survey that will be we will be bringing on board to utilize with students, and that data that will be obtained through that tool that we plan to put into place before school lets out this June will be incredibly important in helping guide our programming and where we direct our attention as we return to school in the fall. There are additional resources, just a shout out here for our Student Support Services page. There are a number of additional resources that they've compiled If you are interested in or searching for something that may be of help to you in a particular topic or area, there's information and resources available on the Student Support Services page for social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs. And so I would absolutely encourage you to check those out if you're interested. Next slide, please. A couple of just quick updates here on under the umbrella of special education. Just to take this opportunity that we have this evening, the next CPAC meeting will be held virtually on May 13th at 6:30. There will be, for anyone interested, and this is for any parent guardian who's interested, there will be a link shared on the district's website, also pushed out through Twitter and email. Just a quick note on summer services for those students that have an individual education plan or IEP and related summer services that have been identified in that plan. We are indeed providing programs in person starting on June 28th, and that program will run through until August the 5th. Tutoring services will also again be provided, and those will be available, as you can see the dates there, June 29th through until July 22nd. And stay tuned for much more specific information coming from the Offices of Student Support Services and or your child's liaison. Next slide, please. Okay, shifting gears, this is also, as obviously we had a couple of questions submitted on this, and I know that this is a topic that is on some minds of our parent guardians, and I know our teachers as well too. So a few things to share, and there's a lot of information on this, but this is a map, if you will, an overview of MCAS. And we'll start with probably the underlying question, and is MCAS happening this year? Everything right now still points to MCAS happening, albeit there have been some modifications or adjustments made at some of the upper levels around MCAS. But based upon a call with the Commissioner of Education this afternoon, in fact, it is abundantly clear to me that we are still on course as a publicly funded school district and system in the state to still have to deliver the MCAS testing. And so with that, obviously, I will admit I wish that weren't so, but there is an obligation here. And so it's with that we will indeed prepare for these assessments. And so what this provides is an overview in grades 3 to 5 for English language arts and mathematics. And you can see the respective schools and when those testing dates currently are being planned for. And you can see that they are in mid to the latter part of May and into June. I won't read or go through all of them, but they're here. And I know that these dates, if they haven't already, will also be certainly pushed out and shared from the principals of the respective schools. We also do know that there's going to be an opportunity for remote students who still at this point in time are participating in remote instruction and are not part of our in-person learning programs. There will be an opportunity for students to participate in MCAS assessment remotely. That is something that the Department of Education has made quite clear. And so certainly stay tuned for more information on that. Next slide, please. Continuing on MCAS at the middle school level, you can see here the current dates that are being planned by grade level for the respective tests. 6th grade ELA or English language arts is currently scheduled for May 19th. 6th grade math, June 2nd. 7th and 8th grade English language arts, May 20th. 7th and 8th grade math, June 3rd. And then science, tech, and engineering, June the 8th. And also for those students, and we do still have a number of them at the K-8 level who are continue to participate in their instruction at this point in time remotely. Those students will also have an opportunity to participate in the assessments. Next slide, please. Finally, on MCAS, as well as an AP update for our high school level. Grade 10 ELA testing sessions will currently are being planned for May 17th and May 18th. Grade 10 math sessions and the grade 9 science sessions currently scheduled for June the 2nd and June the 3rd. There's not remote testing, at least right now, we are under the understanding that there's not remote testing for grade 10 students. AP exams are scheduled from May 18th through until May 28th. Some of that testing will involve grade 10 students, so we'll be sure not to have any MCAS testing during that window of time. And finally, our junior students will be invited to test with sophomores if they are interested in scholarships associated with MCAS scores. And that is an option in either the spring or the fall. Next slide, please. All right, shifting gears somewhat to sort of what's ahead and looking ahead to the spring and the summer. And I thought it probably most important to start off with a little bit of a view into terms of summer academic programming. And I will say that Ms. Elliott, our assistant superintendent, is going to talk a little bit more about this actually tomorrow evening at the regularly scheduled school committee meeting. And there is some additional information in the school committee packet, but these are some of the highlights. So first off, just to be clear on a couple of things, there is absolutely a strong recommendation from the Department of Education, from the state, that schools and school districts offer some type of summer academic program for students. And that is clear and that is understandable. And I am certainly here this evening to tell you that that's what we plan to do. What is not clear and what has not been established are any specific requirements or any specific expectations, around the exact structure of those programs. In other words, the Department of Education has not said that school districts must offer X or Y. They've encouraged summer programming, but they have not specified in any way, shape, or form the age or grade level or subjects that a district must offer or should offer. And so, to no surprise, I'm sure of many, undoubtedly, it is going to again be the case of something here that will look quite different, I'm confident, from school district to school district. There is not one template that will be in place. And I can tell you very briefly that some of my conversations already with some of my superintendent colleagues in very nearby districts, that what their programming looks like is quite different. And so it is what it is, but I think that that's just an important piece to point out. Two things to note before we jump into a little bit more about what this programming tentatively is looking like and what we're planning. Anything that we're going to be able to offer, of course, is going to be contingent upon staffing availability, whether that be Wilmington staff or any staff from outside the district. And with all districts presumably offering programming, I think that staffing will or could be somewhat of an issue. In addition to that, but just as mentioned a few moments ago, Wilmington absolutely will continue to offer the traditional extended year program as required to meet the needs of students on individual education plans. So I think those 2 points just to keep in mind, but as we move forward here, next slide, please. Here's what we're currently planning in Wilmington in terms of summer academic programming. And I want to stress that this is tentative, this is taking shape, but it's very early on and it's preliminary. But here's what it looks like right now. Here's our thoughts for summer academic programming. First off, an option for kindergarten to 5th grade students that will be identified by their teachers as potentially at risk or as a student who perhaps might benefit most from academic support over the summer. A little bit of a different approach for students in grades 6 through 12, or at our secondary level. They will have an opportunity to pursue remediation and or credit recovery at the older grade levels. That students are going to be certainly, as we structure this program, they will be participating in the grade level that they just completed. So if, for example, your child is in 4th grade right now, we would have them participate in the summer program for 4th grade, not for the following year. Priority as we think about this right now, because we are probably going to have to we're going to have to prioritize students. We don't know at this juncture what the interest is, of course, of families. We will explore that. It very well could be the case, and we expect that it could be the case, that some families may not want their child to participate in a summer program. And that's understandable for a variety of different reasons. But certainly if we have more students who are interested in spots that we can offer, we are going to have to make some prioritizations, and we'll do that through teacher recommendations. And certainly, if available seats are there, we will open up that window and extend to other students. And right now, our thinking is a lottery system. And perhaps that lottery system doesn't need to be put into play, but it may. And if it does, that's our thinking around how we'll approach that. If, for example, we can offer 25 spots in a particular grade level, and we have 75 students that are interested, then it would be through a lottery system that we feel might be fair and the most appropriate way to approach that. Our planning right now for this is a program to run Monday through Thursday from 9 o'clock until 12. These programs will be supported through some of the ESSER funding grant money that I mentioned a few moments ago, and thus they'll be free of charge for students. And the goal ultimately of the program is going to be to reinforce and practice grade level skills in 2 specific subject areas: English language arts and mathematics. Next slide, please. With a view of a little bit farther out, and this takes us, of course, through the next 8 weeks, and sooner than later, I know it will start to be on some minds around class placement and how we're going to approach that. I just want to, I'll speak to this tomorrow evening at the school committee, but also just to take this opportunity and share with our families that it's absolutely something we're thinking about. It's absolutely something that work has started with, but as we did last year, we are going to hold on releasing any class placement information until the early part of August. And as I mentioned at probably this time last year, I think it was, the reality is that both staffing changes and just fluctuations in student enrollment over the summer do sometimes result in the need to make adjustments. And what we realize is difficult is when we release information about a child's placement and then perhaps have to change that, or the teacher has to change. That's really difficult for students and families. And so because of that, and like we did last year, we're going to hold on student placement being released until the first part of August. So obviously stay tuned for more information about that, but that's the planning right now for next school year. Next slide, please. Okay, then a couple of quick shout outs as we think about, again, the upcoming 8 weeks and what's happening. A few highlights from some of our schools here. First off, Wilmington High School. The concert band will be performing on May 11th. These are, that's virtual, I believe. May 13th, senior prom is taking place. May 25th, the jazz band concert. June 4th, as hard as it may be to think about, the class of 2021 will be wrapping up their year. Scholarship night is scheduled for June 4th. And June 6th, the 2021 graduation that this year will be taking place outdoors on the football field behind the high school. And so because of that, we have a rain date in place, and that is June 7th. Stay tuned for more information on their class awards night, as well as National Honor Society, the induction ceremony there. Next slide. From the Boutwell and the Wildwood, a couple of things here. The Early Childhood Center Parent Advisory Committee is holding a virtual Scholastic Book Fair, May 3rd to May 16th. For our families, you'll be getting a flyer soon about that. For any new kindergarten families who might be moving to Wilmington, registration occurs at the student's local school building. And so information can be found online about that, and details on how to enroll on the website as well. Next slide, please. Finally, in terms of shout-outs for some of the upcoming school activities, the Middle School Drama Club will be hosting a performance of The Help Desk. And that is, I understand it, is a stay-at-home play that will be taking place May 14th and May 15th. Next slide. Our CARES program. A couple of things to just take this opportunity to share with our families about. First off, in the spring, as hopefully many are aware, we are returning to full programming grades 1 to 5 with 5-day in-person scheduling and reopening afternoon coverage for kindergarten. And there is, as I understand it, space still available. So for any families who may still be interested for the remaining weeks of the school year, it's not too late if you have a kindergarten child. Looking ahead to the summer, it is obviously with great anticipation, and I know our families are excited to have this program back online, obviously after this past summer and not able to offer this programming. Registration is currently open for Summer Cares program, and it closes on May the 24th, so there's certainly still time for that. The program is intended to run June the 28th through until August the 12th. And again, like in the recent past, the Summer Cares program will be held at the North Intermediate School, and that programming will be held between the hours of 8 and 5. All Wilmington residents entering grades 1 to 6 are absolutely eligible to attend the CARES program. And for further information, you can find a link to the CARES program off of the district's website. Food services, just a couple of things to share with you as we make our way through the remainder of the school year. It is indeed the case that all breakfasts and lunches, and this is important to point out, this is not just a Wilmington decision or approach here, but one supported across the state, across the Commonwealth. All breakfasts and lunches are free for the remainder of the school year for students. Also, for the remainder of the school year, curbside meals will continue as they have for so very long, and obviously have been a huge hit here in the community on Tuesdays from 2:30 to 4:30, again at the Wilmington High School. As of right now, planning points us in the direction of having for most of the summer the opportunity to have distributed 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches that will also continue to be free, along with fresh produce and low-fat milk. Right now, the plans are for those items to be distributed from the high school from 9:30 until 12 on Wednesdays. And there will also be free snacks for breakfast and or lunches for summer programs. So stay tuned if your child is going to be participating in one of those programs. Next slide, please. And finally, this evening, a couple of just quick updates around athletics. And really a view for the summer. We've had quite a bit of informational update from Ms. Musio, our athletic director, and we're so excited for her leadership and the work that she's done with our coaches to help make these sports as part of our spring season possible. Boys and girls lacrosse, boys and girls tennis, boys and girls outdoor track, baseball, softball, wrestling, and cheer are all underway. And certainly, that's a great thing for our students, and we're so thankful that this is possible. And so those are underway, but really wanted to take this opportunity with a view to the summer to share with you some exciting news, thinking about bringing back online programs. The Wildcat Sports Clinics are back. They will be back this summer. Again, of course, we were unable to offer those this past summer, but boy, have I come to learn that these are a huge hit in our community. Participation has generally been through the roof. And so we are hopeful that resumes this summer. Sports clinics will be available for children in grades 1 to 8. Clinics will be held at the Wilmington High School with a few exceptions. All clinics will be run by WH coaches, alumni, and student athletes. The cost of most of the clinics, not all, but most of the clinics will be $200. And if you are planning to have your child take part in more than one clinic, then there is a discount for that. Clinics will be running from 9 until 2, Monday through Thursday, 9 until 12 on Fridays. There's a couple of exceptions, as you can see there, with field hockey and boys basketball. But we're thankful for this opportunity, and we're really so hopeful and look forward to having hopefully a lot of our students participate in the sports clinics this summer. Next slide, please. And just related to athletics, but again, another opportunity for our students this summer. A new endeavor, the Wildcat Strength and Conditioning, or at least new in recent years, Strength and Conditioning program, and really aim to try and support athletic development. And just as the title suggests, strength and conditioning. The details of this program, July 5th through until August 13th, and it's for specifically students incoming to 8th through 12th grade. You can see the days that it'll be offered there, with a focus specifically on strength training, conditioning, footwork, and agility. It's an early morning activity, and the primary reason for that is to allow for this program and the respective student athletes to get in and then to get out and make way for the clinics that I just mentioned a few moments ago. Location of the strength and conditioning program will be at Wilmington High School, and you can see the cost there, $50 a week or $250 for all 6 weeks. So we're proud and feel that, and hopefully our families do, that this is relatively for the time and opportunity, I think a modest cost, certainly in comparison to other programs around. And again, we are hopeful that we'll have large participation this summer. And that is it for all of the respective updates and a bit of a view ahead to the spring and summer. But finally, this evening, if you were in and around town, you may have seen some activity at all of our schools throughout the district. This week is a big week for one of our Wilmington's finest, Officer Brian Moon. Is bringing to a close, as I understand it, 26 years of service with the Wilmington Police Department. And we want to take this opportunity and just share a couple of images that were captured today of Officer Moon and some of our students. We have a lot more of these, and I know that there's a video circulating and some pictures, and so check those out if you can. But I want to take this opportunity and thank Officer Moon for all of his service for Wilmington and for all of his diligence as a safety officer and working so very hard, both behind the scenes as well as in front, to keep our students and our staff safe. We wish Officer Moon all the very best of good health and good fortune in his retirement. He brings his career to an end officially this Friday. So thank you, Officer Moon. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you did and you know others that didn't, we will make this available through a number of different platforms. Thank you again to WCTV for your partnership throughout this evening and all of the many events and activities and additional meetings throughout the course of this last year. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your continued support. Stay healthy, be well, and all the best to you and your family for a great remaining 8 weeks of the school year. Thanks so much. Take care and good evening.